Yeah, bienvenidos, Javier. Yeah, no sois encantado. Yeah, Nancy, you'll have to help me out. That's about as far as I go. So, Javier, just basically to start off, we're going to ask, what was it like for you in Cuba? How did you get into athletics? Why athletics? Why not basketball? And what was it that you loved, especially about high jump? Was it only high jump, or did you have other events?
El atletismo no es, o no era, ahora es el más popular, del evento más.
So he says that athletics isn't the number one sport in Cuba. As some of you might know, baseball is very much the most popular sport. And then there would be things like volleyball, and in the top 5 is still athletics, but it wouldn't have been the top one. But what attracted him very much was like the conditions that you needed to do athletics. So at 10 years old, he started in athletics, and he participated in running, in the long jump and different things, but he wasn't so attracted first off to the high jump because he was scared of it. He was scared of it, and it took a while. But also it's among the 5 disciplines that are obligatory in athletics training. So he had to obviously take part in the high jump as part of his athletics training. And little by little, he really got into it. So by the age of 14, he was specializing in the high jump.
But the big question is, look, early success, how does it happen, you know, to that level? 233 at 16, I think is extraordinary. It was a world record for the age. You know, Steve Smith, Dragutin Topic also jumped 237 as 19-year-olds. It's not the end all and be all, obviously. And like we said at the beginning, we're interested in the long-term development of athletes, but it is incredible, and it's a mystery what kind of secret sauce, what kind of magic happens that creates such incredible achievement at such a young, delicate age. And if we were to listen to and reflect on Stefan Holm last week, where he suggested they weren't doing heavy lifting, heavy weights, or any of the really complex stuff at 15, 16, even 17, how's the guy jumping 233? I certainly don't know.
And then at the age 16, you jumped 2 meters 33. That's amazing within 2 years. How did that happen? Off you go, Nancy.
Yo creo que unido primero al talento, creo que fue lo principal que me hizo llegar tan alto. Luego, por supuesto.
Javier says that, well, mainly he definitely puts it down to having some talent with the good combination that he was very tall, so that gave him a big advantage. And he always felt that he wanted to do well at what he tried. So yeah, he always put in a lot of effort. He was very disciplined in his training, in his behavior, putting the training in, and definitely having a good trainer from such a young age.
Nancy, what type of training did he do at 16 years of age compared to when he trained, when he broke his first world record in 1988? How much did that differ?
Bueno, yo tuve la suerte desde los 14 años hasta que hice mi segundo récord del mundo.
Javier says one thing he was very lucky that he was able to have the same trainer over that period, which very much helped. And year by year, the trainings increased, but gradually, but consistently. So his strength training would gradually increase, and his height, the amount of height that he was jumping, the amount of total exercise in total that he was doing was increasing. So between 1982 and 1988, when he was, training for that first world record, with Godoy, his training was increasing gradually year by year, but there was a big increase in total over that period, which really put the whole thing together for him.
Thanks, Nancy. I might just interrupt here and just tell everybody, Nancy is a very good friend of mine. She's no background in athletics or sport. So all of this talk that we'll be doing about plyometrics, strength and conditioning, it's all new lingo for Nancy anyway in English. So be patient. I've tried to prep her in what the high jump even is, okay? So thanks, Nancy, for that. So Nancy, just one quick question. When he was 16 then, I'm assuming he wasn't doing weight training.
Desde los 14 años, 15 años, comencé a hacer pesas.
So yes, he said he was actually already doing some weight training at 14, but nothing close to the amount of weight training that he gradually built up over the years to get to 1988.
And Tone, do you want to go in there? You love this area, weight training.
No,
squats,
I'm trying to do the math on
squats.
what age he was in 1988. Were you 1988? You probably 18, 20?
Cuando hice mi primer récord, me faltaba un mes y tanto para cumplir los 21.
He was almost 21. He was 1 month short of 21 years old.
Okay, great. So can I ask, what did a typical week look like in your preparations in the off season when you were 20 or 21?
Depende de la etapa de entrenamiento, casi como que la dividíamos en tres.
There's three, depending on what part of the training they were at, there was different stages to the training. So basically there would be the stage of general preparation, which wasn't as close to a competition time. Then they would move into special training stages. And then the final stage would be the competitive stage, which was the most intense. So they would have different levels of physical exercise. I think in the special training stage, he would already have 3 times a week particular strength exercises that he would be carrying out. He would carry out lots of multi-jump exercises. And then there was lots of technical exercises that they would incorporate into the special stage, coordination exercises, acrobatics, I suppose, different types of, and different speed exercises for that. So now he's going to tell me about the competitive stage. Well done,
Nancy. Well done, Nancy.
I'm learning lots.
Yeah, we'll get you running next. Yeah.
Depende del tiempo.
The competitive stage, well, definitely depended on how many days before the competition they had. And if it was like, if they had a whole week before, for the week previous of the competition date, he would train 2 times in that week with strength exercises, 2 times with technical exercises, and he'd definitely take 2 days, I suppose, 2 times of rest. So he'd definitely fit in rest days. And then if let's say if the competition was on a Sunday, for example, the 4 days prior, I think he didn't have as much of the strong exercises incorporated.
You did super, Nancy. You did fabulous. There's lingo in athletics world for all of that. We can translate. You did brilliant, Nancy. We'll get you jumping soon. Just to tie on there, there's Eamon Harvey has a question here, and I'm going to ask it because so Eamon wants to know this. You'll understand this one, Nancy. It's about PE. We do it in school here as well. So he wants to know, did the fundamentals of his physical education program in school in Cuba give him a good foundation for his athletics? And that's from Eamon.
Los fundamentos, los ejercicios físicos que aprendí.
He says that yes, that definitely a good base from when he was in school, he thinks is definitely essential for any young person who will maybe later on go on to practice more sports at different levels. And he says that definitely not too little, but also not too much in terms of how much sport you have, because that will help very much for an athlete to get to their best condition and also to be able to last longer in their athletics career or whatever sport they choose.
You know, kids athletics, kids sport, always important, absolute given that, you know, kids need a good, well-ranged, wide range of exposure to sport at a very safe level. Nothing new there. So let's try and really get to the magic of, you know, how we jumped so successfully for so long at such a high level. I don't think there's any doubt about the kids stuff being super important at a structured PE level in school. That's absolutely given. It needs support.
And another question for him, Javier, the coaching structure in Cuba, is there a structure firstly? You've mentioned you've had the same coach all the way through, I think Godoy is his name, but is there support for juvenile athletes in Cuba as well as senior athletes? And if so, what is it? What does it consist of?
Similar to what Olivia just said, which was the how different is the preparations and lifestyle of their junior athletes to their senior athletes? Is there a big change in the way they prepare?
Yo creo que de una fase de juvenil a una fase ya de nivel mayor, creo que uno madura en todos los sentidos. Más que todo.
Well, definitely the difference between the, like juvenile level and senior is big, and it varies a lot. Firstly, maturity level, you mature in lots of different ways, but definitely mentally is very important, and a big difference that you gain much more mental maturity as you become a senior, and physically as well. You're more prepared, and definitely with just more experience of the years behind you, it makes a big difference in making decisions during your training sessions. You're more conscious about how you're training, and obviously in the competitions themselves, when you're competing, you have a lot more experience and maturity. And then in terms of the supports, that the difference between the juvenile and the senior level, well, yeah, there is a lot of supports for the juvenile level that he would have had, but it definitely increases a lot for senior level. So the difference is very notable. There's the clubs are offering different types of supports. There's sponsors involved. The fans, even the fans' recognition of the results of senior level is much more than for juniors, and so that really builds and adds to the supports around a senior level athlete.
Thanks, Nancy. You're playing a blinder. Ask him this one now, Nancy. When did he start using sports psychologists? I see there's great YouTube videos of how that brought him to his 2:45 world record. So at what age was he when he started using them, and how much did it affect his jumping, does he think or feel?
Pero allá en Cuba nosotros tenemos la suerte, digo, de que cuando
yeah, in Cuba, says we're lucky enough to have, when we're already being pre-selected nationally for our sports, every athlete, every athletic area is has supports from about 2 to 3 doctors, 2 to 3 physios, and 1 or 2 psychologists for every one of those. So basically that he would have had a team available to him for just all the people doing the jumps of that 2 or 3 doctors, 2 or 3 physios, 1 or 2 psychologists. So he was 16 and he was able to work with a psychologist, and was lucky enough to have the same psychologist as well, who knew him very well year after year, obviously till 1984. That was Gustavo, and that well, the relationship over a long time was very beneficial in that sense too. Says it's always beneficial, he thinks, to be able to have a psychologist accompanying the athletes, but it might not be the same benefit for everyone, because not everyone is as conscious of how important the psychological aspect can be. So that different level of consciousness will vary obviously with everyone, and some people might not be as convinced that it's necessary to have that support as well. And when he was injured or away from the competition, in different moments that he couldn't compete, those were moments that having his psychologist there was very helpful as well. Not only did my trainer help when I was in moments of having been injured or not being able to compete, but he also helped me obviously in moments when I was in good condition. And even after I retired, he was still very aware of communicating with me, and through our federation, through different athletes, he would be sure to have people, I think he sent like kind of motivating phrases and things, so he'd make sure that everyone was still supporting each other and communicating with Javier, and basically still staying in contact and being supportive after his retirement.
Which is great. And Tone, you have a load of questions, yeah?
Great. So just building on that previous answer, my question is, people like Jose Godoy and his coach after 1992, De La Torre, I think was his name, and also those doctors, physios, psychologists, they obviously work at a high performance level. They obviously have they're obviously the best at what they do, the best coaches, best doctors, best physios, I'm guessing. So how do you reward those people, incentivize those people, and allow access for the young guys to those high level support people? And how do you educate those high level coaches, for example? So what I'm trying to get at is the team element, the team of great coach, great physio, great doctor, great agent, manager, whatever. How do you structure that? And possibly, I'm guessing, because of Jose Godoy, and maybe the communist thing in Cuba, is there any connections with Russia and the intelligence from their coaches in Eastern Europe and Russia? It's a long question, I know, but I can clarify.
You want it all. You want it all, Anton, I know. Okay.
It's about the expertise. In a nutshell, it's about the expertise. How did they develop it and how do they allow access to it?
No sé cómo se trabaja en cada uno de los lugares. El caso de Cuba, que es lo que yo puedo hablar, teníamos un equipo.
I can mostly talk for Cuba because it's what I know. But basically we had one team and we always worked as one team. Nothing was separate. It was all teamwork. Everything was communicated between all the specialists. The trainer, our trainer would definitely be communicating with the doctor the whole time, with the psychologist. An athlete wouldn't have a session with their psychologist without the trainer knowing about it. Even the massage days would be planned out. Everything was communicated. People wouldn't be taking vitamins without consulting with the doctor, the trainer, etc. So it was all very much a team effort the whole time with lots of communication.
Fantastic. That's a really good nugget of information. I mean, it sounds, again, full respect to the political system, but it's centralized, it's coordinated, and it's very much the oneness. You know what I'm talking about here? That's the theme of communism. It's oneness thing. But if you've got the best, then people don't work in the background with alternative methodologies. It seems to be centralized. Am I right in saying that? Like, if you got the best physio, the best coach, then they say, okay, why don't you? Is there intervention if they see a talented athlete with potentially a coach who's damaging the athlete? Is there intervention? And do you have to work with the recommended centralized high performance team that he mentioned?
El doctor, el fisio, el psicólogo que trabajan juntos, nos van haciendo pruebas periódicamente.
One thing that we would do is that there would be periodical tests being carried out on the athletes. So this would help to feed into the analysis that the doctors would be doing on the athletes, and they would be measuring their muscle work, the types of trainings that they're doing to see if particular levels that they're reaching are too high or too low. And these would all be fed back, obviously, to the trainer. The psychologist could be feeding back that their motivation right now is low and they need to work on that. So all those things would be fed back, and the trainer would use them really to improve their the whole training that they're receiving.
My final question before I'm happy to go to other people is, again, building on that, does he find there's resistance to that? I mean, are there coaches who say, no, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that, and they think maybe they know it all? And secondly, why are the current generation of Cuban jumpers or athletes in general struggling in comparison to the previous generations?
He's gone. So 1 minute, he's coming back.
This was similar in Sweden and also Ireland, maybe, that there's right now there seems to be maybe more distraction or maybe more life demands. Maybe it's an economic factor. People need to go to work or something. But what's the difference between that generation of great Cuban athletes and 30 years later? And also, is there resistance to best practice?
En cuanto a que el entrenador se niegue.
Well, in Cuba, it would be quite difficult for a trainer to resist in the way that Anton was asking, and try to resist the best practice that's being offered. And basically this is down to the fact that there's weekly checkups done up on all the senior level athletes, and they basically do a report on a weekly basis for every single athlete. And this includes everything from their medical state to their mental health, what the masseuse reports back, and even their education. Can you hear me? Or is it?
Yes.
Yeah, coming
I'd love to know what David thinks about that when you're finished.
Tells me it's unstable. More. So basically this report is a very thorough report that's done up on a weekly basis, and so it would be quite difficult for a coach to be going against all these factors that are reported from all the other specialists. And in terms of what's changed, what's happened in Cuba in the last 30 years, it really, he thinks it comes down to economic factors. Before, about 30 years ago, we were up to scratch with the same types of material, equipment and everything that we needed for athletes, but the economic situation doesn't really allow for young competitors, young athletes, to go to as many international meetings. So they're just not out on the world stage as much as they would have been maybe 30 years ago. And this is really affecting that part of the performance. But in general, he says that there's a lot of talent in Cuba that's still there, but yeah, the economic factors have affected.
There's a lot of questions coming in here, and there seems to be a repetition. And the big question is the 2:45, the world record. Firstly, what did it feel like to clear it? Someone has said here, does he think was that his limit? When will it be broken? Who's his favorite jumper at the moment?
Me sentí, por supuesto, cuando lo batí el récord del mundo muy bien, muy contento.
When he got the 2:45 world record, which still holds, he says, I felt really happy and very honored, but really and truthfully, the most emotional one for me was really the 2:43 jump. I was much more ecstatic when I reached that record at 2:43 meters, because it was my first big record, and it wasn't that I was totally sure that I would get to the 2:45 record, but I knew I could achieve it more. So obviously I was very emotional when I got it, and I was very grateful and honored. But yes, definitely the 243 I was much more ecstatic at that point. And I definitely never thought it would last so long. In '88, I never knew that it would still be holding 33 years later. And now these are the names that I'm not sure of. Varenko and Martin, how do you pronounce them?
You're doing grand. We'd struggle with them too. You're doing grand.
So basically two high jumpers who were very close to his attempts. Varenko and Martin, I'm not sure.
Barshan.
Yeah, because in Spanish
Barshin.
accent, yeah, Barshin. So he admired their very good attempts to try to break his record. And in terms of his favorites, it's hard to say, but Varshan, he feels Varshin is the most stable of one of the jumpers that he would see, but he doesn't quite know what condition he's in, perhaps right now for Tokyo. But he's also looking towards the Cuban. He's the Cuban Sayas is one of his favorites as well.
Wow, great. And does he coach? He's coaching himself now at the moment, Javier?
¿Ahorita estás entrenando a otros atletas?
Estoy entrenando a 3 chicas en Cuba.
Muy bien. He is actually training 3 women right now in Cuba.
Wow, high jumpers, obviously, yeah.
Salto alto, ¿sí?
Sí, claro.
And how does he find coaching? Is coaching very different to jumping? Being a jumper?
A ver, la diferencia es grande, y más cuando uno quiere que sus atletas hagan lo mismo o igual o parecido a como lo hacía yo.
So yeah, it's obviously a huge difference, and it's difficult because obviously I would like them to do as much as I have managed to do.
I'd like to ask a question we put to Stefan Holm, which was, a very simple question, but 3 critical success factors, for his elite athletes, particularly around the special preparation he talked about, which was the core heavy training. He talked about speed, strength, plyometrics, that's jumping exercises. Can you ask him, just simply, what are the top 3 most important things? Stefan Holm said it was about keeping injury free, right? For me, Paul McKee would appreciate this. It's like in golf, keeping out of the rough, right? You end up in the rough, you're going to add to your score so much. So what are the 3 most important critical success factors in the preparation of your international athletes in the heavy training period?
Para ser un buen saltador, tiene que tener.
He's saying to be a good high jumper, he thinks that there's 3 important things that they need to have. Now, so I think he's talking about more characteristics right now. He thinks that they need to really have good speed and strength. They need to have good technical ability, and they need to really have mental strength.
Yeah, look, I think that's a good answer. We know that an attitude is important and the psychology is very important. We talked about it with Stefan Holm. I guess if you consider it like a pot and you're cooking a meal and there's a recipe and you've got maybe 20 ingredients in the recipe, the question was, probably maybe if there was some technical insights, technique is super important, but characteristics are useful, but maybe there's somebody else like David or Barry Pender has a question that is a bit more about conditioning. The conditioning is really important, obviously. The battle is won before the war. So what goes on in the battle, when you're in the deep depth of winter when you're preparing, what is so important? Some people think it's diet. Some people think it's the power to weight ratio, elastic strength. Some people think it's having a squad, a team of athletes who work together and you get the synergy. Other people think it's something else, like whatever. But I think he's answered the question from a characteristics perspective, but maybe someone else might want to tailor the question.
creo que la diferencia, no creo que haya alguna.
Then there's not really that much difference other than I'm very aware of the fact that I would be
Que no se esfuerzan tanto como los hombres.
giving out different amounts of exercise and different levels of exercise in terms of the strength abilities of women to men, the multi-jumps, which I know has another term, but that's the direct translation, and different quantities of the different types of training exercises, which would definitely be different. But apart from that, the training would be quite similar.
Brilliant, Nancy. Nancy, this is a specific high jump question, so if you don't get it, I'll try. I'll demonstrate it for you here. Yeah.
Okay.
So Javier has a particular run-up style, extra strong long strides. Was that intentional from a biomechanical perspective? And did he, for his run-up, this is from Brendan Riley's question, he was like, was he working on his rhythm and on the curve and on the lift? Because his run-up is particularly unique. And he also has a short approach. He sometimes does a short approach. So if you could just ask him about his run-up, his approach to the bar, that'd be great.
There, just to say, he has an unorthodox technique in some ways. I mean, the Irish would find it very different. Huge, long, rangy strides. He doesn't arch his back, or he didn't back in there when he was at his peak. He was flat over the bar. So I think, I mean, you can take confidence in that you don't have to have the perfect technique. But again, I keep going back to what are the critical success factors then? If you don't need to arch your back like bar shim, and you don't, I mean, I remember one of the Stefans said to me once, there was a Steiner Hone said to me once, he said, those long rangy strides are ridiculous. They're a waste of energy. They don't generate speed. But just going to finish that sentence. His technique was unorthodox. I hope he answers the question, but the point is that it's encouraging for people who do have unorthodox approaches, but still, as much as you can not do certain things like maybe arch your back, or not use a double arm shift, he does some things which are absolutely critical, like accelerating to the bar. But I think Barry's question was about the long strides and why.
How he did it differently in the rain as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was in Crystal Palace in '94 when he jumped 2 meters 40 off a short approach. I think it was like a 5-stride approach or something, and he jumped 240. And Brendan wants to know how the hell did he do that?
El acercamiento mío de los pasos largos, más bien era porque es característica propia mía. Soy un saltador que corro así, lo corría así y lo hacía lo más natural posible. Y lo que intentaba es que más que todo la aproximación, hacerla lo más rápido posible.
In my approach style, it's very much my style to have the long strides, and it's not the usual, obviously, for high jumpers. But I try to make it the most natural possible. But it's definitely my own style. The last part of my approach, I always tried to make it as fast as possible. And that was my characteristic as well. In terms of when I'm actually over the bar, in flight over the bar, I usually didn't do an arch, I didn't use the curve as most high jumpers would, but instead my technique was to lift my hips when I was above the bar at that point.
Yeah, and would he have, looking back, does he have any regrets? Would he have changed anything? Does he still jump today as a master? 3 questions, Nancy.
Creo que hubiera hecho todo igual. Me refiero yo en cuanto a los entrenamientos.
Well, in terms of what I've achieved in athletics, I think I would do it pretty much the same way. I would do the trainings the same way. I was a very disciplined athlete. I always worked to the maximum level, very fast. And yeah, I think I would do it all the same way for what I've been able to achieve. And right now, no, I don't jump anymore, but mostly because I haven't trained, and therefore I'd really be afraid of an injury at this point.
Well, one of the questions anyway is about the charity work that he does do at the moment with teenagers. He works with juvenile delinquents to get kids through sport, to get them involved in sport. And an idea I was going to put out to the group here, and I might send it in an email afterwards. We did speak to, here he's back again. We did speak to Javier. Would he like maybe set up a GoFundMe page? Because we're doing this all for free here this evening, and you don't have to give, but if anyone felt like contributing, it'll go straight into his account and he'll use the funds then for helping delinquents and drug addicts and kids, basically helping them through sport.
Tenemos una comisión que le llamamos Comisión de Atención Atleta.
In Cuba, we have a commission of, and a rough translation, a commission for the attention of athletes. Probably not the best translation, but basically many retired athletes form part of this commission, and the work of this commission is to mainly visit sports schools. So they have schools dedicated obviously to sports, and also we help out with the families of the different athletes that might need some support if basically either an athlete has a health problem and we might be able to help out. They even have done prison visits to some athletes who are in prison in Cuba, and basically offer support to the families of these athletes that are in prison, therefore providing mostly material needs for these families who are in different situations economically, but principally really to as well motivate kids to really get into sports.
There's Paul McKee wants to know, was Alberto Juan Torano a big influence on him when he was growing up? He's a Cuban athlete, Nancy.
Dile que sí, cuando yo era pequeño, que yo empezaba el deporte, en Cuba había...
Well, yes, most definitely. Alberto Juan Torena was a big influence for me. And when I was still small and just starting off in athletics, there was basically three big athletic names in Cuba. There was Silvio Leonard and then Alejandro Valle in different areas of athletics. And they definitely inspired me a lot in that first stage when I was young. But Alberto Juan Torena probably had more of an influence because he also had a similar running style to myself. So there was an extra connection there because he also did big strides.
Very good. Nancy, can you ask him how often did he clear 240 or even higher in training when he was training in the high jump? How high did he go, raise the bar in training sessions? That's another question there.
En entrenamiento 240 ni lo intenté.
Nunca.
Nunca. En una o dos ocasiones 237.
Well, he never jumped 240 in training. The maximum he ever managed in training sessions was 237. But usually he used like 235 was his marker. So when he'd do a couple of tries and he'd get to 235, 2, 3, 4 attempts, and he could get that, he knew then he was jumping well at that point. So if he knew in training he could get to 235, he knew he could probably do 240 in competition.
Amazing, amazing.
Good to know.
And Tone, Dave Sweeney here, our National Fields Events coach, coordinator, wants to ask a question.
Just on behalf of all the coaches and Irish coaches and athletes, it's an honor to have him here tonight, just with us all, and just many thanks for everything. So, en segundo, ¿prefieres salsa o salta de alta?
No, prefiero saltar. Pero bueno, el año 2001, cuando yo sabía ya que iba a retirarme, como no estaba convencido de que iba a ser entrenador, hice un grupo de salsa. Salsa Mayor es el nombre.
So the question was, so Javier, what do you prefer? Do you prefer salsa or to jump?
But no.
Salsa or high jump? Yeah.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah, sorry, high jump, not just any old jumping. So Javier says, I prefer the high jump. But I think when he was retiring, I think he said, he decided to form a salsa group and he called it Salsa Mayor, which is like higher salsa, maybe, something like that.
Yeah, because he wasn't sure that he will be a coach or not, but
Yeah, so he had an alternative plan just in case.
And Nancy, will you ask him, has he ever been to Ireland, to this little island?
Me gustaría. He competido, pero en los países nórdicos.
He said he hasn't been, but he would definitely love to come visit Ireland. He has competed in other northern countries, but not had the pleasure of being in Ireland. But he wanted to remember the name of a good Irish high jumper who has achieved 230, but he in the 80s.
Adrian O'Dwyer. Yeah.
No, in the 80s, Anton.
80s, 230. No, we didn't have anybody. Brendan Riley.
Brendan Riley. Brendan, the guy whose bed you woke up on.
Disculpa, ahora me recuerdo, sí, que ahora me lo están recordando. Competí en Belfast una vez, sí.
He was in Belfast once for a
Belfast.
competition.
Okay.
So you
well,
have
look,
been.
you're very welcome in Ireland anytime. We have a performance enhancer called Guinness, and there will be a free supply of this when you visit, okay?
Vale, seguro.
Thanks, Javier. Or else we'll come visit him in Cuba, tell him. We'll all come. Yeah.
Oh, ahí te vamos a caer a Cuba a visitarte también.
Por allá lo esperamos.
Salsa me Javier in Cuba, yeah? Una vez.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much
Salsa
again.
con Javier. Yeah.
Salsa con Javier. Bueno, en Cuba.
We'll keep in touch, hopefully.
Yeah. Muchas gracias. Yeah.
Gracias a ustedes.
Yeah.